To start off, we're missing a part of the coaching staff that's been pretty familiar for us over the last like 3-4 years. And it kind of came out of nowhere. And it's something that the media's been talking about over the last couple of days. So I figure, why not entertain it here? Mike Sullivan, our QB coach slash offensive coordinator for half of a season and also a senior assistant last year, is no longer with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it happened very unceremoniously, to say the least, because there was no announcement, none of that. His contract pretty much just expired, and the Steelers finally got around to removing his name and picture from the coaching staff on Steelers.com, the website. Here's Brooke Pryor and her tweet on it. It says the Steelers removed Mike Sullivan's bio from the website. Not sure when it happened. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, no one knows when this necessarily happened, like when he was removed from the website. But former QB coach, senior offensive assistant, appears to no longer be employed by the team. Number of pro coaches in Pittsburgh named Mike Sullivan is down to 0. Yeah, that last statement is very true. Penguins also fired head coach Mike Sullivan. Wasn't an assistant coach or anything, but head coach, 2-time Stanley Cup champion for the Penguins. A little bit bigger of a deal removing that Mike Sullivan than this Mike Sullivan from a Pittsburgh sports team. But nonetheless, yes, no more Mike Sullivans on Pittsburgh coaching staffs, at least from what I know, unless the Pirates have a hitting coach or a pitching coach named Mike Sullivan that we don't know about. No more Mike Sullivans in Pittsburgh. And Ray Fittipaldo of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette gives a further explanation in one of his articles. Says Sullivan was a great guy and a good coach, but Steelers offensive coordinator Arthur Smith wanted to bring in guys he was more familiar with. Honestly, his contract was up months ago, and the Steelers finally got around to removing him from the website. So that makes sense. He wasn't fired. His contract was just up. We didn't renew it. There was no reports, though, on whether or not we were renewing it or we were going to let Mike Sullivan walk. Typically, you have something surrounding whether or not a coach is going to be coming back or not. And we didn't hear anything about Mike Sullivan. And I guess a couple people were just randomly checking the Steelers website and found that his name was no longer there. And that has been some of the buzz over the last couple days or so. Yeah, Mike Sullivan's not here anymore. Steelers are moving on. But the funniest part is or the weirdest part is that we didn't really replace him with anyone. Mike Sullivan's just not here anymore. Because if you look at the coaching staff, going back to that tweet, it's all the same names, right? It's all the same guys, except for that quality control coach, Luke Smith. So maybe he's the replacement. I don't think we had a quality control coach last year. So instead of Mike Sullivan being our senior offensive assistant, we just changed the title, gave it to Luke Smith, and now we got a quality control coach. That would be my guess as to what we did. We had 9 guys on the offensive staff. We lose Sullivan down to 8. We add Luke Smith. Now we're back up to 9. Everyone else remains the same. Not the end of the world, though. I did like Mike Sullivan here. He brought good experience. He's a guy that the players seem to really like. He goes all the way back to being Eli Manning's quarterback coach with the Giants and, did his rounds in the league, various teams, was an offensive coordinator with the Buccaneers for a little bit. And when he joined here in 2021, he was the quarterback coach for Ben in his last season. And then he stuck around with the new quarterbacks, Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, like that era when we kept Matt Canada and moved off of Ben, hashtag the sabotage. If you know, you know. But Mike Sullivan was here for all that. And he was also here for when we fired Matt Canada in 2023. And Sullivan and Eddie Faulkner took over as the offensive coordinator, co-offensive coordinator, co-play callers, whatever you want to call it. And I actually thought him and Faulkner did a pretty damn good job. They were there for Kenny's first game without Canada, obviously. And Kenny had, basically like a 300-yard game. The offense put up over 400 yards for the first time in like 50-something weeks or something crazy. And then Kenny gets hurt the following week, and we have like this Mitch Trubisky 2 or 3 game lull where the offense looks awful. But then we get Mason in there, and with Faulkner, Mike Sullivan, and Mason, our offense looks like at its best in a minute. I mean, it was a while since we've seen the offense put up that type of production. So, yeah, I think Mike Sullivan was good for us. And then when we hired Arthur Smith last offseason, he stuck around as an offensive assistant. Arthur Smith did bring in some of his guys like Zach Azzani, Tom Arth as his quarterback coach. So Sullivan got replaced in that role. Arthur Smith's the new offensive coordinator. He brings in a whole new quarterback coach. So there's nothing really for Mike Sullivan there, but we bring him back on the staff as a senior offensive assistant, try to maintain some of that continuity, which I think was smart. And I even delved in deeper to what his duties actually were as a senior offensive assistant last year. And apparently he was in charge of YAC, like literally yards after catch, trying to improve that stat, trying to improve that little part of the offense. And if I had to guess off the top of my head, I would say our YAC, our yards after catch, wasn't that good last year. But it was actually 5.7 yards after catch per completion, which was 7th in the league. So not bad. Not as bad as I thought. So he was good in that role. He was good in the offensive coordinator role. I thought he was good as a quarterback coach. Seemed like the players liked him. Big Ben liked him. Kenny liked him. So, yeah, not the be-all, end-all that he's not coming back. Is what it is. And if Arthur Smith wants to find some guys that fit his scheme, fit his way of doing things more, so be it. Yeah, maybe it just wasn't a fit anymore. I think it was good for the year that it was last year. Have a guy come back with some continuity, a guy that was familiar with the players over the last 3-4 years, be a bridge for those players and the new OC and Arthur Smith and some of the other new coaches. But now that Smith's been around for a year, some of his guys have been here for a year, we don't need Mike Sullivan as bad. And Arthur Smith even brought up this comment about how his core scheme in 2024, he had to pivot a little bit. He did have to change his scheme. So another reason as to why Mike Sullivan being here last year was smart. And it didn't cost us anything. He was a senior assistant. In fact, this is something that the Steelers should be doing more with their coaching staff. Even if we don't have a defined role, just bring in a quality coach and give him a random-ass title like we did with Mike Sullivan. His contract was up last year, so I guess we only brought him back for a year deal. His contract ran up again after 2024. We're just not going to be bringing him back. But Mike Sullivan is objectively a quality coach in this league, quality quarterback coach, spent time as an offensive coordinator, a good guy to have on your staff. Didn't necessarily have a set role for him at the time last offseason, but we're like, you know what, screw it. It makes sense to bring him back, have that continuity. Let's make him a senior offensive assistant. We'll make him in charge of YAC. I'm sure he did a little bit more than that. But still, just to have Mike Sullivan on the staff, it's not going to hurt you. Something we should do more of, honestly. We should take a page out of our own playbook and how we handled last offseason with Mike Sullivan and do it more. Like bring in Mike Munchak. Bring in some quality defensive coaches that are out there that were either fired as defensive coordinators or former fired head coaches. Why not just make them a senior defensive assistant, make them linebackers coach, whatever. We could do that. The Ravens did it this year with Chuck Pagano. I don't see why we can't be bringing in Mike Munchak or bringing in a Mike McCarthy to be some sort of offensive assistant. But this is what Smith said about how he pivoted his offense last year, how he had to change some things. Says, I pivoted. I mean, last year we didn't run as many true outside zone. And that was due to just some familiarity with some of the players that we had. You try to adapt to the strengths of the players. You don't want to be rigid. We ran a lot less wide zone, outside zone, whatever you want to call it, than I had in the previous couple years. And we saw that last year, even though we did get some outside runs with Najee. I don't know if that was the best idea. Maybe we got too many outside runs just with Najee. Maybe those should have been delegated more to Jaylen Warren, because we got more stretch and outside runs than what we had with Canada and some of these offenses in the past. But now that we got Caleb Johnson, we got Jaylen Warren back, we picked up a Kenneth Gainwell, I think some of these outside runs are going to make a lot more sense, and Arthur Smith is going to be able to implement his scheme more for this year and going forward. But having, again, a Mike Sullivan on staff, I would assume helped Arthur Smith in pivoting his offense and being more versatile in his approach. Tailoring his offense toward a Justin Fields, tailoring his offense towards a Russell Wilson. Even though those quarterbacks weren't around when Mike Sullivan was here, Mike Sullivan still knew the rest of the offense. He still knew the offensive line, the running backs, the receivers from being here since 2021. Now Arthur Smith, though, with Mike Sullivan not being here, Smith having that year under his belt, I'm sure and with us getting Caleb Johnson as well, I'm sure we're going to be seeing a little bit more of what he was doing in Tennessee in Derrick Henry when things were really humming for Arthur Smith and his offense. But, I mean, if we got Aaron Rodgers, he's going to also have to have some leeway with that. He's going to have to let Aaron Rodgers cook when Aaron Rodgers wants to cook, because it's Aaron Rodgers. Anyway, that's enough about Mike Sullivan and this offense and Arthur Smith's scheme. Let's talk something a little bit more exciting. The 2026 draft. We're a ways away from it, but it's never too early to react to some mock drafts, react to some projections, and where some of these analysts and reporters, who they have the Steelers taking for next year's draft. And quarterback is being linked heavy to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and no surprise. So I got about 6 or 7 different mock drafts I looked up, and all of them have the Steelers taking quarterback, but it's all different quarterbacks. So let's just go over some of these, and I'll give some instant reactions, some of my knee-jerk reactions to these quarterbacks being linked to the Steelers, and who I think right now, before the 2025 college football season even happens, who I'm looking at and who I would want the Steelers to take if we do end up taking quarterback in next year's draft, because a lot can change from now and then. Aaron Rodgers come in here, ball out, and we're looking at Aaron Rodgers for another season. And then our need for quarterback in next year's draft is not as much, although how many more years does Aaron Rodgers have? I think 2026 is the time to take a quarterback, because, I mean, worst case, that dude's probably going to be sitting for a year, and then you're going to have him competing with Will Howard in 2027. If you do have Rodgers for 2 years instead of just this 2025 season. That's like worst case scenario for whatever quarterback we may take in 2026. Like, he might have to sit a year. Anyway, the Athletics' Dane Brugler has us taking LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. And all these drafts have us picking in, the predictable spot of between 15 and the early 20s. So he has us taking Garrett Nussmeier, LSU. CBS Sports, Josh Edwards has us taking Nico Imalieva. I probably botched that. I mean, we know who he is, though. Nico just went from Tennessee, had a little bit of a disappointing season there last year. A lot of hype around him. Was one of the number one recruits at the quarterback position coming out of high school. And he got Tennessee to the playoffs, but he didn't really elevate the team, didn't really elevate the offense, didn't really put his foot on the gas like most were expecting. He wants more money this offseason. Tennessee says nah, and he ends up transferring to UCLA. Just an overall bad look for Nico. He's going to have to really step up at UCLA and just prove what happened last year at Tennessee was like an outlier. That wasn't really fully him. That was just him getting his feet wet and starting to develop, because he still has he still has a lot of time in college if he wants to stay there, but he's going to be draft eligible. I wouldn't be that big of a fan of this pick. I think Nico is overrated, just from what I saw at Tennessee and then how this offseason was handled. Just not a good look. I mean, you played the way that you did, which wasn't like that amazing, and you're getting paid $2 million from the Tennessee NIL, and you want more. It's like, bro, why don't you just get better next season? Then you talk about more money. Like, come on. Because I don't think he got more at UCLA. So he hits the transfer portal, goes over to the Bruins. We'll see what he does out there. See what he does. The talent is there. You could see it, the talent, the size, and all that. But he just really didn't live up at Tennessee. I wouldn't be a big fan of us. As we sit here right now, I wouldn't be a big fan of us taking him in the first round of next year's draft if he declares. Few others. Fox Sports, Rocco, I forget who did this for Fox Sports, but it was one of the Fox Sports articles. They have us taking Rocco Becht. Who? Out of Iowa State. I have no clue who this dude is. He was the third quarterback taken off the board in this mock draft. And at that point, Nussmeier, Nico, Drew Aller, and Lenore Sellers were still all available. The only two quarterbacks that went before Rocco Becht were Arch Manning and Cade Klubnik. So whoever did this Fox Sports mock draft must be really high on Rocco Becht, or Rocco Becht is paying the dude that made this Fox Sports article, because I've never even heard of the dude at all. He's not being considered as one of these top 10 quarterbacks for next year's class. CBS Sports, one of their mock drafts, has us taking Sam Levitt, because I already said a CBS Sports one earlier with Josh Edwards. He had us taking Nico. There was another CBS Sports one. Sam Levitt out of Arizona State. That would be pretty dope. PFF has us taking Drew Aller. And there was a Sports Illustrated one from Brian Fisher having us take Fernando Mendoza. Who spent the last couple seasons at Cal. He just transferred to Indiana. The last two, Drew Aller, Fernando Mendoza, I'm good on that. I think Drew Aller's overrated. He's being considered as like the number 2 or number 3 quarterback in this class after Arch Manning. I just don't see it, bro. There's a lot of other guys here that I think are better than Drew Aller, that are more clutch than Drew Aller. I just don't see it with him. And then Fernando Mendoza, maybe he can improve his game at Indiana, but he was so-so at Cal. Some were saying if he would have stuck around at Cal, he could have been like the next Jared Goff or Aaron Rodgers in that program. But last year, I don't know. I don't see it. He's got the size. I think his throwing motion's a little weird at times. If he develops his game in Indiana, who knows? Maybe he will be talked as one of these top quarterback prospects at the end of 2025, going into 2026, if he does declare for the draft. I just don't see it right now. Here's who I would be good with, though. So I listed off all these mock drafts and who they have the Steelers taking at the quarterback position. All, like I said, all different guys. I just went off of 6 of them. All 6 have us taking a different first-round quarterback. Here's who I would be good with. Here's like the top 4 guys going into this college football season that I'd be looking at if I was the Steelers. Arch Manning, obviously. We're not going to get Arch Manning, though. We're not going to be bad enough to take Arch Manning. If he even comes out of the draft, for the draft. We don't even know that for a fact just yet. He has a couple more years of college eligibility. But obviously, Arch Manning. Yes, I think he should be on the Steelers' radar. No doubt about it. Sam Levitt, I'd be cool with him. Hines Ward compared Levitt, and Hines Ward's like an Arizona State coach. He's on their coaching side. I'm assuming he's a receiver coach. But he compared Sam Levitt to Big Ben. He thinks like his competitiveness and his toughness reminds him of Seven. And I got to see him like later in the season in some big games. And then in that college football playoff, I thought he competed pretty well, man. Like he didn't look like the moment was too big for him or anything. Took Texas. Yeah, it was the Texas game, right? He took Texas to overtime. So I think he's good. I think he can sling it. He's got good arm talent. pretty good mobility. That would be the second guy. I don't have this in any order. Probably Arch Manning one, but these quarterbacks aren't necessarily in any order. Lenore Sellers from South Carolina. Dude's got good arm, got a cannon, fast as hell, great mobility, like a top-tier dual-threat quarterback. And he was doing some really good things at South Carolina just as a freshman. So if he develops even more for his sophomore year, it'd be his redshirt sophomore year, and takes his numbers up a notch, because it was like 25 total touchdowns, both in the passing game and in the running game, 3,000 total yards. If he could crank those numbers up even a little bit more, maybe 4,000 total yards, get the total touchdowns up to like 30, 35, I think he's going to be a slam dunk first round pick. I really like Lenore Sellers' game. And then the last guy would be Garrett Nussmeier. I think he looked pretty good at LSU. I think he's got a good arm, got a good feel for the game. So we'll see what he does another year as LSU starter. But I think those are the four guys right now I would be most good with the Steelers taking. Again, what order? I don't really have a set order. But out of all the quarterbacks being linked to the Steelers, out of all the guys being mocked, I think those would be my four that I'm looking at most going into this college football season and saying, yeah, I'd be good with the Steelers taking. Now, again, a lot can change. Maybe I don't like one or two of these guys on my top four list as much as the college football season goes on and eventually ends. But that's where I'm at right now. Way too early, 2026, draft projections, draft outlook for the Steelers. I'd be good with Lenore Sellers, Arch Manning, Sam Levitt, and Garrett Nussmeier as first-round quarterback picks. Anyone else, I'd be like, I don't know. But we call it way too early for a reason, but it's still fun to talk about. Draft season is still fresh, and doing these exercises in a couple months don't make as much sense. So why not do it now, just a few days removed from the 2025 NFL draft? And then we'll probably start seriously ramping up these 2026 draft talks probably middle of college football season. You see how the landscape actually played out, and then you do have some conversations like that. And then obviously as the college football season winds down and the NFL offseason ramps up, then it becomes even more serious. But that's it for today's show. We're going to talk some Big Ben comments regarding Aaron Rodgers and Will Howard tomorrow. But I thought doing the 2026 draft outlook and reacting to some of these mock drafts and who they have the Steelers taking at the quarterback position in the first round would be fun. And then obviously the Mike Sullivan conversation has been buzzing over the last couple of days. I thought it'd be appropriate to react to that. So I'll be back tomorrow, 6 p.m. as usual. Stop through, tune in. Until then, though, stay chilling. Here we go, Steelers, and peace.